Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are at the law office of Don Dennis YouTube channel, and tonight we are going to be discussing tips on avoiding bad deals and bad contracts. The reason we're discussing this is that because sometimes there are certain things that we see in advance that tip us off to what we might be looking at getting into, a deal we might be looking at signing is not the best deal. I am very interested in hearing any comments or ideas that you guys have as you're watching because we all can learn and share from each other. I'm going to drop the link in the chat if anyone wants to come up and discuss. And without any further ado, I am attorney Don Dennis. This presentation tonight is for educational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is formed between any viewer and my office unless there's a signed agreement on file between the both of us. This channel focuses on helping individuals and businesses protect their income, protect their revenue, and avoid being taken advantage of in all the myriad of transactions that can occur and that need to occur in your business. If you could please hit that like and subscribe button, I definitely would appreciate it. Also, it will enable you to get notifications and to learn about other relevant, important, and dynamic videos that will be produced on this channel. I worked as an engineer for over a decade and have been practicing law for over a decade. So I bring this unique perspective, having looked at an assortment of business deals from all standpoints. And I use that experience to help you and to help my clients have a masterful advantage in any situation that they encounter. So if you think about it, if you get into a bad deal and you sign it and you realize you can't get out of the deal or out of the contract, it oftentimes reminds me of a song I'm familiar with that was called Sitting in the Rain, Waiting on a Rainbow. Because that's how you feel. You're just sitting there getting rained on and you don't really know what you can do, and you're hoping that the rain will stop as soon as possible. Here in Los Angeles, California, we have a lot of amusement parks. We have Magic Mountain, Knott's Berry Farm, Disneyland, Universal Studios. And one thing that Universal Studios has up in Hollywood is they have a ride that takes you all around the theme park. And it gives you a behind the scenes look at what it's like when they're filming movies and TV shows. And when you're on the ride, they can simulate rain. They can simulate thunder. The lights will go out. They simulate special effects. And it's very captivating and it really gets your attention and garners your whole perspective as you get a behind the scenes look. But when that ride is over and those special effects stop and you get off that tour tram, you're back to reality. And sometimes when you're gearing up to sign a contract or you're looking at purchasing something or engaging in some type of business deal, that's how you feel. You feel like there's a lot of excitement going on inside of you. There's a lot of momentum. You see the special effects. You see in your mind all the money you're about to make. You see all the benefit of getting a product at a cheap price and being able to resell it for a great 10x profit or whatever profit you think. But sometimes a lot of things that are going on are just special effects. They're not real. And what we want to do is decipher these things so that we know what's real and what's not. We want to make sure that we're not being fooled into believing certain things are going to happen and they're not going to happen. And there are ways that we can kind of identify some things that may not quite be right. We're not talking about a situation on this evening that's dealing with fraud, because obviously fraud exists all the time. We have shows such as American Greed, American Trap Queens, things of that nature that tell us about all these schemes and devious plots that people concoct. And they have co-collaborators with and other people where they're trying to take people's money. But we're talking about situations where individuals are fully in their right mind. They're fully cognizant of what's going on. However, there are terms in agreements that are so one-sided, terms that are just unfair. And if you don't say anything, if you don't identify or point that out, you might be signing an agreement that is 100% legal, but highly against your best interests. So by entering into agreements that you don't understand, it creates a lot of tension. And the tension comes from the lack of comprehension on your side. And so we want to talk about how to avoid that. And we can avoid it by observing all aspects of a deal, all aspects of a contract before we get into it. And this has nothing to do with whether you're entering into contracts as an individual or a corporation, because I've seen many agreements written by corporations, Fortune 500 companies, that have been presented to my clients, and they have all types of unfair terms in there, all types of unfair clauses or mistakes. So it doesn't matter that a legal department prepared the agreement or a team of attorneys prepared it, because they are humans too, and they make mistakes just like anyone else. And you have to have a careful eye to catch these things so you don't get caught up. So let's get right into it and talk about a few ways you can identify potentially bad deals. What are some ways we can do so? First and foremost, what is the presentation of the agreement someone is making to you? Are they making an agreement orally where you're talking about it? Are they making it through text message? Is the agreement that they provided to you on papers and contracts that have misspelled words? Right then and there, an oral agreement can be very problematic because it's subject to, what people thought everyone understood was the understanding. For example, let's say you get into an agreement and someone has made you promises that if you pay a certain amount of money, then they'll give you certain things or products, and you do everything orally, even if it's with a major company. Well, at the end of the day, if they prepare a contract and give it to you and you sign it, and all the oral representations and promises that were made to you don't make it into that contract, what's going to happen if a few years down the line, the person you made the agreement with is no longer with the company? Who is going to stand by those promises that were made? Because other people may have no idea. And if some of those promises are completely against what the company typically does, then you might be stuck. Therefore, it's always good, not just because people can come up with the common things where I forgot, I didn't know, I didn't understand that's what you meant, but even good people, even people that are trying to be fair, can forget minute and important details. And if they do, and it's not in writing, then it's subject to interpretation by whomever has whatever evidence can be produced to make the contract work. Another thing you should look for when you're looking over agreements is, besides there being misspellings, are the page numbers correct on the paperwork? Are the paragraphs, if they're numbered, are they correct? Sometimes people repeat paragraphs. They'll copy. I've seen agreements or contracts where one paragraph on page 3 is copied again to another completely different section on a page far down the agreement. And they might be, and it might be in the wrong section as opposed to what they were trying to explain to someone. Sometimes there are paragraphs that have titles in an agreement, and the information underneath the title has nothing to do with that title. So now what you run the risk of is, if that situation comes up that's being discussed, you have no bearing as to what is supposed to occur. And we're going to get into some specific subject matter with clauses and paragraphs within a contract that have a lot of importance on what you're doing. So let's move forward here. Look in contracts if you're purchasing something to see if any guarantees are offered. The bottom line is, when you buy things, technology, even a new car, things do not always work as planned, even if they are fresh out the box. Sometimes things are damaged and you didn't know. Sometimes there are internal errors, especially when we think about, for example, construction. If you bought a new property, if you bought a new building, if it was constructed, unless you stood next to, for example, the electrician the whole way through and watched them lay all the conduit and all the wiring, or you watch the plumber lay every single pipe, or you watch the concrete company lay all the concrete, you don't know for certain that everything was done completely correct. And that could be a hidden issue in the matter. So therefore, if you're signing something and there's no guarantee of workmanship, there's no guarantee that the technology will work, then what are you going to do? You could potentially be stuck or have to make an insurance claim to your own insurance based off of something that you bought, rather than consider inserting or negotiating in the contract that they provide you some type of guarantee, what the guarantee is going to be specifically, what it will cover, and for what length of time. You want to have a guarantee. For example, I looked at American Airlines. Their website says a flight is oversold when there are more checked-in passengers than seats. When this happens, our team gets involved as early as possible to find volunteers to change flights. So what American Airlines is clearly telling people is that despite paying for a ticket, going to the airport, thinking you're about to hop on a plane, they can oversell the seats. So they may have 300 seats that the plane can fit, and they might oversell it by any number. Now, what that says is there is no guarantee. Now, does the representative, when you make an order over the phone for flight tickets, do they tell you that? I'm not so certain. Is that in bold writing that pops up as a prompt when you're ordering online your tickets to go on your destination or your vacation? I'm not so certain. However, it's in what some people call the fine print, the terms on the website. And as you'll see, the fine print, everything in the fine print is not always fine. So that's why you have to understand what you're signing. In addition, if you go to Apple's website, and so a lot of times companies will say there's no warranty for different things if they break or if there's a problem. On Apple's website, it says they disclaim all warranties of their products. So they're telling you right there, they are not offering a specific warranty on their products. However, we're talking about Apple and we're talking about, things that we typically just scroll through. But if you're buying something, if you're engaging in business for services, to obtain services for someone, you need to read the contract to see if there are any warranties for what you're purchasing. You have to take your time and go through that, because once you're done dealing with the salesperson and they turn this project over to someone else, oftentimes you're stuck. Another important term in contracts is a limit of liability. What is a limit of liability? A limit of liability says, look, if we're responsible for some damage that occurs to you, if there's a problem, there's a limit to how much we're willing to pay you for your trouble, how much we're willing to give you for the damages. Regardless of how much it costs you, there's a limit that you and I are agreeing to with how much we're going to pay you. For example, if you check out Dropbox's website, it says we limit our liability to you to the greater of $20 or 100% of any amount you paid under your current service plan. So if you use Dropbox to store documents for your company, and you have very important documents and contracts and paperwork and schedules and all types of terms, that might have cost your company thousands and thousands of dollars and hundreds and thousands of man hours to put those documents and those contracts together. However, if there's some type of technical error, if Dropbox's website goes down, what they're telling you plain and simple is we're limiting our liability. We're sorry, but the most we'll give you is $20 or 100% of any amount you paid us. And I don't believe Dropbox's monthly service charges and monthly subscription plans are in the thousands of dollars a year, oftentimes for smaller size corporations or even mid-sized corporations. So you have to be thinking, all right, if I'm doing business with someone and they're limiting the liability in case something happens, what type of backup plan do I have? If I bought a product and they're saying if it's damaged, there's no warranty, there's no guarantee, what backup plan do I have? Especially if I'm relying on these products, I'm relying on these services to operate my business on a daily basis. I have to have some backup plan, or I need to negotiate for more of a warranty or more liability in the event of a problem. Another thing that you can do in order to avoid entering into bad deals is take some time and do some research. Research on the company or the individual that you plan to do business with. You can do research by hearing what other customers and clients of that company have said. What are some places where you can do that? You can go to Yelp. If you type in the name of a company on Yelp, you can look them up and see what type of reviews they have. If you're a company that has locations throughout the country, you'd want to input the name and the location of the company where you're going to work. So for example, let's say you're dealing with a UPS store and they have locations and offices all in every state in the country. Well, you're looking at dealing with one in San Francisco, California, and you know the address of the location you want to deal with. You're going to use them for mailbox services to get your important business mail or other items. Well, then you can look that one up to see what kind of reviews they have gotten on Yelp. Also, you can look on Google to look up people's reviews and companies' reviews through Google reviews. How many stars do they have? What are people saying with them? Because this gives you some insight as to what it's going to be like after all the fanfare is over with. As I said on the Universal Studios ride, after the ride stops, and you're dealing with them on a daily basis. So looking at these reviews can be very helpful. Also, it still doesn't hurt to go to the Better Business Bureau's website, because you can go to the Better Business Bureau, look up a company, see if they have any complaints, see what other consumers are talking about. So that would help. In addition, it's always good practice to ask a service provider or a company that your business is about to go into business or considering going into business with for references. And you want good references, at least 3 other references that they've done business or provided services for. And then once you get those references, you need a name, you need phone number, an email address. Also, you want to find out what specific project they did and make sure that project is identical or very similar to the project you're looking to engage in business with this company for. For example, if I was hiring an IT consultant to build out data security practices and make sure I had a very secure network at my company, I would ask that IT consultant or company, look, this is what I want you to do. So give me some references. I want references of companies where you've done this exact project or something similar so that I can talk to them and find out how you handled them as a client. I don't want references that they might provide me where they did graphic design services or where they hooked up telephone equipment throughout the office. That's not the exact type of work we're talking about. So when you're ready to invest a significant amount of money, and all money is important for your company, you want to make sure that that company has good references and can show you they are solid at doing that type of work. Another thing that's important when you're looking at contracts is you have to think into the future. Now, can you tell the future? No. No one knows for certain what will happen in any agreement. And if you're watching now, please get those likes up. Please hit the like button for me and make sure you hit the subscribe button. But again, what we're talking about is if things don't go right, how can you get out of this agreement? Some agreements, and you have to watch carefully, have automatic renewal terms in them. And it says this is an agreement or a contract for 1 year. And at the end of that year, this contract is going to automatically renew again. If you're fine with that, that's great. But if you don't want to be locked in to automatic renewal, you want to question that and consider taking that term out. It happens a lot with subscription services. And if you're hooking up or connecting your credit card to process payments for whatever agreement that you've signed, you don't want to automatically be charged if that's not what you want. Now, sometimes when you're looking at agreements like that, they'll put an automatic renewal in there and they'll say some language like, look, if you want to cancel this agreement at any time, or I'm sorry, at the end of the term, you have to send us a letter and it has to say this and that in writing. You have to specify why you're canceling. You have to send it to this address and to this person's attention and things of that nature. So it can be quite tedious, so that if you don't follow every single step, you're not going to be let out of that agreement and it will automatically renew. So not only do you have to be aware of automatic renewals, but if there's an option to get out of the agreement, you have to be aware of the process and know how to do it and have a reminder. So if you're on a 1-year project, a subscription or a service agreement, and it says you have to give us 30 days notice, you want to set a reminder at the 11th month that, hey, I'm going to do on this particular day what's necessary to cancel this agreement. Also, if in fact you're in an agreement or you're doing a business transaction and it has to do with revenue sharing and profit participation, so that you have your company and another company, or you and another individual are selling products, or you're doing entertainment services and you're due a percentage of royalty or percentage of the profits that are gained based off of the products that are sold or the units that are sold or something like that, that all sounds great, especially if you're splitting it 50-50, or if your share of the portion is 40%. But you have to think, how can you verify that you're receiving the right amount of money? If you're entitled to 40% and you know that the product sold $1 million in 2021, that means you're entitled to $400,000. But if you don't know how much sold in 2021, you need to make sure that contract allows you access to the financial records. You want to make sure that contract puts that in there, that you can audit and you can verify the money that is due to you. Because if you don't have the right to audit, then it can be subject to disagreement and it could end up leading to a court battle to make sure you're getting the money that you need. Hello, Corey. Glad to have you here this evening. Hope you're enjoying yourself. And we're talking about making sure at this point you can verify any money that is due to you based on your profit participation. It's extremely important. If you look online, you'll see lawsuit after lawsuit with entertainers, celebrities, and even manufacturing and other companies constantly arguing and bickering about profits that are due to someone. It happens a lot in licensing agreements where you have, for example, a brand and you license to someone else where they can sell your products in a city. Well, if they're selling it and they owe you a certain percentage based off of sales, how do you verify it? And if you don't have access to the financial records, you're stuck. So it's best to put in the agreement, I have a right to view the financial records. Many times it will say you have to view it during business hours. You can do it twice a year or once a quarter. And then after you have an error, you have to dispute it in a certain manner, or it might say only an accountant can view our records and they have to come to our office. So you want to find out when you can view the records, how you can view the records. Is it just an accountant or do you have the right? Where exactly do you have to go? If the company is based in another state, they may say, well, you can view the records if you travel to this state. So if you're in New York and the company is based out of Nevada, you're going to have to plan and budget to send a knowledgeable person to Nevada, or have an agent or someone that you trust in Nevada to go through the records and get the information you need so you can verify that you're being paid what you're supposed to be paid. Another tip that I want to share in terms of avoiding a bad business deal. You want to make sure you're dealing with licensed people. Growing up, I remember they had a term for people that would work on cars, maybe down the street. You might see them when you're walking down the street, and they would call them shade tree mechanics, because typically it's hot in LA And someone might that is a mechanic, they don't have their own shop. They're working under a shade tree. And they'll say, hey, I'll change your oil, or I'll fix this on your car, or fix your engine. This is where I'm at. Go down to Pep Boys and grab something, and then come back, and then we'll come up because of we'll go ahead and we'll work out a little deal as to how much I'm going to charge you, and that's that. And so it's a shade tree mechanic. He doesn't have a license. He doesn't have a facility. He's just working there, and you understand that, look, your guarantee, your warranty is as good as the person doing the work. If something happens to your shade tree mechanic, that's as good as the warranty that you have, and you're stuck. I see Corey saying that what we're talking about with respect to that profit participation is exactly why the Joe Budden podcast broke up. I guess there was some dispute with respect to how the money was supposed to be shared and how everyone was supposed to get paid. And it happens all the time, regardless of size. So what I'm saying is, with respect to licensing, you want to make sure that when you're dealing with certain individuals, they have the appropriate and requisite license. If you're dealing with a doctor, in I think almost every state in the country, the doctor has to have a medical license to practice medicine. An attorney has to have a legal license, a law license to practice law. An architect has to be licensed oftentimes. Building contractors must be licensed in the state of California. Building contractors that are not licensed are subject to all types of penalties under the law. So you want to make sure, as a heads up, if we're talking about avoiding getting into bad deals, if the person's supposed to have a license, make sure they have it. In addition, just because you walk into a business and people have plaques on the wall, just as you can see here, I have some behind me, you want to make sure if they have a license and it says, for example, the state of California, the state of New York, is that license current? You can check that out by going to that licensing division or government agency's website and checking that out. Because if you had a license in 2000 and now we're in 2022, that license is not current. Therefore, the individual providing the services might not be the most current on what the law is, what their duties are to you, and the most current educational practices and best practices to properly take care of the customers. So that is extremely important to check in specialty fields and other fields, like I stated, such as contractors that you might work with. Another check that you can do on a business that you're looking at engaging with is if they're a corporation or a limited liability company, going to the Secretary of State or other department's website in your state to make sure that their corporate filings are up to date, to make sure that their filing is not suspended. Because if they're not making sure that's up to date, they're not making sure that they're complying with the law and complying with their duties under the law, then that could be a red flag that they might not take how they handle and transact business with you seriously, that they might not be on top of those things. And you want to make sure that whomever you're doing business with, exchanging your valuable company information with, proprietary information, that they have something vested, that they take their business seriously. And when you're dealing with business, since I got on that, it's important when you have relationships with companies, especially if it's going to be a long-term relationship, you can be, and you likely will be, entrusting important information with them, confidential information, proprietary information, information that makes your business stand out above your competition. So you want to make sure that that agreement you sign says something about they're going to protect that information. They're not going to disclose it and share it with people you don't want it shared with. They're not going to share it with your competitors. They're going to maintain it in a safe records in their office. They're not just going to have it laying around like papers on the desk, but if it's important information, it's going to be put in a file cabinet, or when they're done with it, they're going to shred it. So you want to check all of that stuff out. If you're emailing important information to people, you want to make sure it has something in that agreement that they're going to protect that electronic information, because that's important as well. Also, when you're talking to companies and you're talking to individuals and you're negotiating, they can tell you that they have experience, but Do they have the right experience for the project that you're engaging with? If they have the wrong experience, how does that benefit you? If they have the wrong certifications, how does that help you and give you any comfort or peace of mind in knowing that they can complete their service to you? For example, it does not matter if someone in high school was voted most likely to succeed, best smile, best dresser, most likely to become president. What relevance does that have to us transacting business right now? We want certifications that correspond to the service you're providing. If you're an IT professional, I want to see you have some IT certificates. If you're an attorney that I'm going to do business with and I need a trust or an estate or someone needs a bankruptcy, I want to know, are you a specialist in that area of law? If you're an accountant, are you familiar with doing accounting work for businesses, or just you file taxes for individuals? You want to make sure if people have these certifications, they have it in the exact area that you need. Otherwise, if they have certifications in areas that have no relation to what you need, then it's kind of like them being voted most likely class clown. It's all a joke, and the joke will be on you, and it doesn't help you. So that's why you want to pay attention to that. Another important thing is if you have an agreement, and let's say, thanks, Corey, I appreciate it. Corey says that what I'm saying is a blessing. And let's say, for example, all these other terms and clauses and paragraphs that we're talking about are in the agreement. Because oftentimes people will have the standard boilerplate terms in an agreement. However, what about the scope of work? What about the tasks that you need the company to complete for the services that you need done? You want to make sure that the scope of work, the tasks that are being laid out, correspond to the work that you want done. I have seen contracts over and over and over again from large corporations where they present them to my client, and the scope of work has nothing to do with what my client needs. And you know how this happens? They have attorneys, they have legal departments. They did not take the time to go through it, and they are copying and pasting scopes of work so that they can easily get through things. So you have to check that to make certain that everything makes sense. For example, if you're hiring a company, construction company, to build a new manufacturing plant for you, and you know that they're building it from the ground up, you bought the land, you have the money for the materials, for the construction, for the permit process, and it doesn't mention anything in the scope of work about getting a permit for your manufacturing facility. It has things in the scope of work about building a medical marijuana dispensary or building a restaurant, and you're not trying to build a restaurant, you're not trying to build a medical marijuana dispensary. Those are examples of things outside of your scope of work. And you definitely don't want to be charged for people working on things outside of the scope of work. So you have to make sure that that scope of work is tight and makes sense. You want to make sure that scope of work and the goals laid out relate to building the manufacturing plant in the example that I'm giving, so that everything works out. What are some things? And sometimes you can use common sense and observe what other people are doing when they had to build out their plant. For example, you need permits. You're going to need government inspections. You're going to need electricians, plumbers. So as long as things make sense, they should be in there. But still, you want to ask questions. Now, we have a question here. And if anyone has a question, please drop it in the comment. Also, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. And the question is, do you feel like artists are afraid to demand their objective work? Sometimes artists are so hungry. They're so starving for the opportunity for fame. And I see this a lot of times in Hollywood, that they're willing to take any type of deal. And sometimes it's not a judgment against them, because you don't necessarily know how long they've been struggling, how long they've been striving to achieve the fame and what they're going through financially. So sometimes they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to deal with rejection or deal with the fact that if they try to ask for what they're worth, they might not get it and they don't know when they might get another deal. So they are, some artists, not all, some are afraid. I've had clients over the years that have, I remember a client and it was a young lady and she came and she said, hey, I want a deal. I want a record deal and I'm looking at making connections here in Hollywood. However, I don't want to sign a bad deal. And so she asked me to go through it. And she was willing to stand on her principle and not sign a bad deal where she would get taken advantage of. So yes, sometimes artists are scared and sometimes, they do have the wherewithal to go through it and say, hey, this deal is not the best deal. Because think about it, every deal, every contract that comes across your desk that your business has to consider is not the best deal. Every contract, every deal is not the best deal. And at the end of the day, when all the lights are off, when all the action and the dramatics have stopped, you want to know and have peace of mind that you've signed the best possible deal and that you've had it analyzed and that you know it makes sense. And sometimes peace of mind is better than saying, I have a contract, I have a recording agreement, I'm going to be in a movie, because it doesn't feel good when you sign deals and then later you think about it and you realize you were taken advantage of and you could have asked questions and did more research so you didn't sign that deal. And that leads right into my next point in terms of tips on avoiding bad contracts. And it's always a telltale sign if someone wants you to rush into the contract. They tell you things like it's a one-time offer. They tell you you have to sign it right now or I'm taking the deal off the table by tomorrow. Or you can't take the contract with you and think it over overnight. When people are trying to rush, a lot of times it's because it's not a good deal. And they fear if you had time to think about it, if you had time to ask questions to someone, they might tell you to go back and ask some questions. They might say, hey, this doesn't quite sound right. And so anytime someone is trying to rush you into a deal, they don't want you to take time to review it. They don't want to give you a copy. They don't want you to do anything like that. It could be a very bad deal. So you want to be careful with that. I'm not saying it automatically is, but we're just talking about tips to avoid bad deals. Another potential issue is that if you're looking at transacting business or getting into a deal with someone and they want to rush you to get paid. It's all cash. I need the money right away. If you want to do this deal, I have to have the money. Why does it have to happen so fast? Why does it have to be all cash? When it's all cash, that means there's little of a record trail. There's little of a paper trail. So that's something to kind of be a little hesitant with. I need a cashier's check. I need it immediately. If someone says I need it immediately, if I don't get this cashier's check, if I don't get the cash, then, we can't do the deal. That right there could be a sign like, why? Why is it like this? Is this how this company does business with everyone? Again, that gets back to our earlier point. What kind of references can they provide? If they have references that say, hey, this is how we always do business, okay. If you're buying fruit from the fruit stand on the side of the road and they're chopping it up right in front of you and they're saying, hey, we're only accepting cash, makes sense. If everybody's in line giving them cash. But if you're dealing with a corporation, if you're dealing with a major contract and they say we have to have cashier's checks, there's no other way. We have to have cash immediately and we have no time for you to think it over. That is a flag and you should take your time and think about it. At the end of the day, you have to think to protect yourself and consider what type of escape plan do I have if this doesn't go the way I want it to go. If this transaction does not proceed the way I want, or if there's any issue, you have to think about it. We got a comment from Johnny Holman right here. He's saying usually your gut will tell you when something is not right. That's true. You have to listen to your gut. There's legal knowledge, there's common sense, there's street knowledge as well. And if your gut is saying, hey, something's not right, take a moment, breathe, and ask some questions. But again, you have to have an escape plan. You want to be thinking, so what are some examples? Let me give you some examples of escape plans. First and foremost, You can't even drive your car or any car. I don't care if it's a Kia to a Mercedes, a block. Once you get in and start that ignition without that seatbelt alarm going off. Ding, 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 ding. It's going to keep going because, and that light's going to be flashing on the dashboard, interrupting any conversation you're having, interrupting any music you're trying to listen to, because that is your safety belt. You can't go anywhere without being constantly reminded you need to have on a safety belt. If you're on a plane, before the plane takes off the ground, they will show you how to evacuate that plane in the event of an emergency. They will show you where your air masks are in case you need your oxygen mask, in case you need to breathe. If you're on a ship such as Carnival Cruise or Royal Caribbean, they will point out to you where the cargo ships are on the side in case you have to abandon ship. So if in all of these situations you have to have an escape route, an emergency plan, why not have one for your business? You have to have some type of insurance or something to protect yourself if, despite the fact that you took all the steps that we talked about, you engaged an attorney, you were diligent, but just in case things don't go as planned, because we cannot predict human behavior, you have to have some type of escape plan to protect yourself. So that's extremely important. At the end of the day, and again, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you know when I'm going live. But at the end of the day, when you're doing a transaction with someone, it's kind of like you're in the kitchen cooking and you're putting different ingredients in there, ingredients such as the terms I suggested you put in the contract. And you're hoping at the end of the day, when the food comes out the oven, it's going to be an aroma, and you're hoping that it smells good. But if you don't put the right ingredients in that contract, if you don't make sure you have all the right deal points in your deal, when you take that final contract out the oven, if you've signed it, it's going to stink. And you're not, just like bad food, you're not going to want any part of it. And it's going to just be a foul odor in your nose every time you walk past that contract on your board or you look at it. So think about that very carefully before you sign anything. We went over tips to avoid getting in bad deals, because it only takes a couple seconds to put your name and your initials on a contract, but it could take forever to get out of it. And as I said earlier, while you're sitting in that contract, it's like you're sitting in the rain waiting on a rainbow, and you don't want to be in that position. So if you need assistance, always make sure you reach out to my office. Check out the videos on my channel where we give more tips of specific business situations to help protect you, protect your income, and keep you from being taken advantage of. I'm Attorney Don Dennis. Thanks for being with us on this evening. Have a great one.